Chapter 1. The Ruins of Kings. The rain had fallen for most of the day, not the violent storms that sometimes swept north from the Sea of Belfalas, but a cold autumn rain that drifted steadily across the plains of Gondor and turned the white stone of Osgiliath dark and glistening. As evening approached, the clouds began to break apart. The rain eased, mist rose from the Anduin, and the ruined city emerged once more from the grey. Boromir stood upon a shattered tower overlooking the river. The wind tugged gently at his dark cloak. Below him stretched the remains of what had once been the greatest city in Gondor, Osgiliath, the City of Stars, the ancient capital of the kings. Now it was a place of broken domes, collapsed arches and empty halls, haunted by echoes of the past. Once, great bridges had crossed the Anduin here. Merchants, soldiers and nobles had passed between the eastern and western banks beneath banners bearing the White Tree. Now only fragments remained. Stone pillars rose from the river like the bones of some long-dead giant. Entire districts lay abandoned. Weeds grew through ancient courtyards. Owls nested within crumbling towers. The city still lived, but only just, and every year Mordor drew closer. Boromir rested both hands upon the parapet. The western bank remained firmly under Gondorian control. The eastern districts were another matter. Patrols still crossed the river. Watch posts remained occupied. Yet every season the shadow lengthened. Every season more ruins were surrendered. The Captain General of Gondor understood this better than most. For years he had fought here. For years he had watched Osgiliath slowly die. Footsteps echoed behind him. Heavy boots, familiar boots. Boromir smiled before turning. Faramir emerged from the stairwell, carrying a damp cloak over one arm. "You always choose the highest tower." Boromir laughed softly. "And you always complain about climbing it." The younger brother approached the parapet. The resemblance between them was unmistakable. The same dark hair, the same grey eyes, the same proud bearing. Yet they were very different men. Boromir possessed the confidence of a warrior who preferred direct action. Faramir carried a quieter strength, a thoughtful strength, one that many underestimated. The brothers stood together overlooking the river. For a while neither spoke. The Anduin flowed beneath them, wide, dark, endless. Eventually Faramir broke the silence. "You've had reports." Boromir nodded. "Several." "Bad." The elder brother smiled grimly. "When are reports from Mordor ever good?" Faramir considered this. Fair point. The Rangers of Ithilien had returned that afternoon. Men who spent their lives watching the borders of Mordor. Men who noticed things others missed. And lately they had noticed a great deal. More patrols, more campfires, more movement within the eastern hills. The signs were becoming difficult to ignore. Something was changing. The brothers both knew it. Neither liked it. Boromir pointed eastward, beyond the river, beyond the ruined districts, beyond the distant hills. Somewhere out there lay Minas Morgul, the dead city. Its pale glow could sometimes be seen after sunset, even from here. "They're preparing something." Faramir followed his gaze. "An attack?" "Perhaps." The younger brother remained silent. The possibility was hardly surprising. Gondor and Mordor had tested one another constantly for generations. Yet something about the recent reports felt different. Larger, more deliberate. The sort of preparation that preceded major events. Below them, the city continued its evening routine. Soldiers moved between watchposts. Lanterns appeared one by one. The sounds of cooking fires drifted upward. Life continued. Even in a city half ruined, a horn suddenly echoed across the river. Both brothers turned immediately. A patrol. Returning from the eastern bank, several boats emerged from the mist below. Long, narrow craft carrying Gondorian rangers. The men looked tired. Mud covered their cloaks. One boat appeared to have suffered damage. Boromir frowned. That can't be good. The brothers descended immediately. The tower stairs spiraled through darkness. Their footsteps echoed from ancient stone. The lower streets of Osgiliath felt almost ghostly at dusk. Statues stared sightlessly from ruined squares. Broken fountains stood silent. Ancient buildings loomed from the gathering shadows. Everywhere lingered reminders of what the city had once been, and what it was no longer. They reached the riverfront moments before the boats arrived. The rangers disembarked quickly. Their captain approached. His face was grim. Boromir recognized him immediately. Marblung, one of Faramir's most trusted men. Report. The ranger saluted, then looked toward Faramir. We found them. The younger brother's expression darkened. How many? Marblung hesitated. A great many. The answer was enough. The brothers exchanged glances. The captain continued. Orcs. He pointed east. Not raiders. Not scouts. Boromir folded his arms. Soldiers. Yes. The ranger lowered his voice. And engineers. That word changed everything. Boromir's expression hardened instantly. Engineers meant bridges, siege equipment, preparations, plans. Not random attacks, not border skirmishes. Something larger, something organized. The captain continued. We also found abandoned camps. How many? At least 6. The ranger paused. Possibly more. Silence followed. The implications were obvious. Thousands of orcs could be concealed among the ruins east of the river. Perhaps more. The ancient city offered endless hiding places. Collapsed buildings, subterranean chambers, forgotten tunnels. The perfect staging ground. Boromir looked toward the darkening eastern skyline. The mist thickened between shattered towers. The ruins seemed alive with shadows. For the first time that evening, a feeling of unease settled upon him. Faramir noticed. You think they're already here? The elder brother nodded slowly. Yes. The younger brother looked across the river, toward the silent eastern districts, the abandoned half of Osgiliath, the half that belonged to ghosts and memories, and perhaps now, to something worse. Night settled over the city. Lanterns flickered along the western bank. The eastern ruins vanished into darkness. The Anduin flowed silently between them, a boundary, a warning, a dividing line between what Gondor still possessed and what it was slowly losing. Boromir remained at the river long after the others departed, watching, listening, thinking. The water reflected the first stars. The ruins stood silent. Yet somewhere beyond those shadows, unseen eyes were watching the city, gathering, waiting, preparing. And though neither brother realized it yet, the coming days would determine the fate of Osgiliath. By the time the story ended, the city would never be the same again, nor would the 2 sons of Denethor, for the shadow was rising, and war was coming to the City of Kings once more. The following morning dawned grey. Mist drifted across the waters of the Anduin and wrapped itself around the ruins of Osgiliath like a funeral shroud. The city seemed half asleep, half dead. Boromir stood upon the western quays, watching preparations. Soldiers checked equipment. Archers inspected bowstrings. Boatmen secured oars and supplies. No banners flew, no trumpets sounded. This was not an army marching to war. It was a reconnaissance, a patrol, a search for answers hidden among the eastern ruins. Faramir approached from behind. His ranger cloak blended almost perfectly with the morning gloom. "The men are ready." Boromir nodded. "Good." The younger brother studied the boats. "You could stay here." Boromir laughed. "And leave all the excitement to you." Faramir smiled. That was the general idea. The brothers exchanged a look. For a moment they were boys again. Not captains, not commanders. Simply brothers teasing one another. The moment passed quickly. It always did. The burden of Gondor rarely allowed long moments of peace. Within minutes, the patrol pushed away from the western bank. 3 boats glided silently into the mist. The river swallowed them. The western city disappeared behind grey curtains. Ahead lay the eastern ruins, the abandoned half of Osgiliath, the forgotten half. The Anduin flowed broad and cold beneath them. Its waters carried centuries of history. Kings had crossed here, armies had crossed here. Now only ghosts remained. Faramir sat near the bow of the lead boat. His eyes never stopped moving, watching, listening, searching. The rangers beside him did the same. Years in Ithilien had taught them caution. The enemy often watched long before revealing itself. Boromir sat further aft, less subtle, more direct, yet no less alert. His hand rested upon the pommel of his sword, a blade that had defended Gondor countless times. The boats drifted beneath the shattered remains of an ancient bridge. Massive stone pillars rose from the water. Broken arches stretched overhead. Several had collapsed entirely. Others remained standing through sheer stubbornness. The sight reminded Boromir of Gondor itself. Damaged, weathered, yet still enduring. Eventually, the eastern shore emerged from the mist. The landing place had once been a bustling district of merchants and traders. Now weeds grew between cracked stones. Empty buildings stared silently toward the river. No voices, no movement, no life. The patrol disembarked. Immediately, the atmosphere changed. The western bank felt inhabited, guarded, alive. This side felt abandoned, a place forgotten by time. The street stretched away into darkness between ruined structures. Ancient statues stood beneath moss and ivy. Collapsed roofs exposed rooms to the sky. Entire towers leaned precariously, waiting for gravity to finish its work. Boromir looked around. "I never liked this side of the city." Faramir nodded. Neither did the enemy. The elder brother frowned. "What do you mean?" The ranger smiled faintly. "Which is why they're hiding here." The patrol moved inland, carefully, quietly. Every intersection was checked, every building observed. The rangers moved like shadows among the ruins. Boromir's soldiers followed more heavily but no less professionally. Hour after hour they searched. At first they found nothing. Then came the tracks. Marblung discovered them near an old market square. Dozens of footprints. Recent. Many different sizes. The rangers crouched beside them, studying, measuring, interpreting. Orcs. Faramir nodded. How many? Mablung looked around, then back at the ground. Hundreds. Boromir's expression darkened. The trail continued deeper into the city. The patrol followed. The ruins became older, more damaged, more isolated. Ancient mansions crumbled around them. Great halls lay open to the sky. Trees grew from courtyards where kings had once walked. Eventually, they reached a district almost entirely consumed by nature. Vines covered walls. Roots cracked stone. Birds nested in towers. It felt less like a city than a forest reclaiming forgotten ground. Then, the rangers found the first camp, hidden within the remains of an enormous warehouse. The enemy had departed recently. Ashes still smouldered. Food scraps remained scattered nearby. Weapons leaned against walls. Boromir inspected the site carefully. Not raiders. No, Faramir agreed. Too organized. The camp could house several hundred warriors, perhaps more. And if Mablung's earlier estimate proved accurate, this was merely one of many. The implications troubled everyone. The patrol continued. The discoveries became increasingly alarming. A second camp, then a third, then evidence of engineering works. Timber, rope, tools, construction materials. Boromir knelt beside a stack of freshly cut beams. His expression hardened. Bridges. Faramir said nothing. He had reached the same conclusion. The enemy intended to cross the river, not merely raid, not merely harass. Cross and stay. The brothers exchanged a look. Both understood what that meant. Osgiliath itself had become the objective. Not the villages beyond, not the farms and the city, the heart of Gondor's eastern defences. Late that afternoon, the patrol reached the highest point in the eastern ruins, an ancient watchtower overlooking the Anduin. Much of its upper structure had collapsed centuries earlier. Yet the view remained impressive. The entire city stretched before them. The western bank, the river, the distant mountains, and far to the east, Mordor, a dark stain upon the horizon. Boromir stood staring toward it. The land seemed somehow wrong, lifeless, hostile, even at this distance. Mablung suddenly appeared beside them. His face was grave. Captain. Faramir turned. What is it? The ranger pointed northeast, toward a ruined district near the river. Smoke. The brothers followed his gaze. At first they saw nothing. Then Boromir spotted it. Thin columns rising among distant ruins. Several of them. Then more. Far more. Not campfires. Too many. Work fires. Forges. Construction. The enemy was building something, and building it on a significant scale. Boromir's jaw tightened. The time for uncertainty had ended. The enemy was here, in strength, preparing openly, preparing confidently, preparing for war. The sun began sinking toward the western horizon. Golden light illuminated the ruined city. For a brief moment, Osgiliath looked beautiful again, almost alive, almost whole. Then the shadows returned, and with them came the reality of what was approaching. Faramir continued studying the distant smoke. Finally he spoke. They're not preparing for a raid. Boromir nodded. No. The younger brother looked toward the river, toward the bridges, toward the western bank where Gondor's defenders waited. They're preparing to take the city. Silence followed. The Anduin flowed endlessly below, ancient, unchanging. The brothers stood together upon the ruined tower, watching the gathering darkness, watching the enemy fires, watching the future draw closer. And neither realized that before many days had passed, those bridges would become the most important places in all of Osgiliath. For whoever controlled them would control the fate of the city itself. Chapter 2. Campfire among the ruins. The patrol did not return to the western bank that evening. The discovery of the enemy camps had changed everything. Crossing the river in darkness carried unnecessary risks, and both Boromir and Faramir wanted another day to assess the scale of the threat. So the men made camp, not in the open, not among the streets, but within the shell of an ancient governor's palace overlooking the Anduin. The building had once housed princes and nobles of Gondor. Now only fragments remained. Great columns stood beneath the stars. Broken mosaics covered the floors. A fountain, dry for centuries, occupied the center of a courtyard now filled with grass and wildflowers. The rangers secured the perimeter. Small fires were lit. Food was prepared. Night gradually settled across Osgiliath. From the western bank came the distant glow of lanterns. From the east came a far less comforting sight. Enemy fires, hundreds of them, scattered among the ruins like red embers. The enemy was not hiding anymore. They were gathering, preparing, waiting. Boromir stood alone beside a shattered archway overlooking the river. The Anduin reflected the moonlight. Silver ribbons danced upon dark water. For a moment, the city seemed peaceful, almost beautiful. Footsteps approached. He did not need to turn. "You're worrying." Faramir sat beside him upon a fallen block of stone. Boromir smiled faintly. "You always could tell. You have a particular expression. I do not." "You do." Boromir laughed quietly. The sound echoed softly through the ruins. For a few moments, they simply sat together. The fire crackled behind them. The men talked quietly among themselves. Somewhere nearby, a ranger played a soft melody upon a wooden flute. The notes drifted across the ancient city. A lonely song. An old Gondorian tune. One their mother had once sung. Both brothers recognized it immediately. Neither mentioned it. Some memories were best left untouched. Eventually, Faramir spoke. "Do you remember coming here as boys?" Boromir looked across the ruins. "With father." Faramir nodded. The elder brother smiled. "I remember nearly falling into the river." "You did fall into the river." Boromir laughed again. "That is an exaggeration." "It is not. You pushed me." "I absolutely did not." The younger brother smiled. "Father said you looked like a drowned cat." Boromir shook his head. "That sounds exactly like him." The memory lingered. Warm, comforting. A reminder that Osgiliath had not always been a battlefield. Once it had simply been a place, a city, a home. The flute continued playing. The notes drifted through broken halls and ruined courtyards. The city seemed to listen. Faramir looked toward the eastern skyline. "You know what troubles me?" Boromir already knew. "The enemy?" "No." The younger brother paused. "The city." The elder brother frowned. "What about it?" Faramir stared across the ruins. "We are losing pieces of it every year." The words carried sadness rather than anger. "Each season, another district is abandoned. Another tower collapses. Another watchpost is withdrawn. The younger brother sighed. I sometimes wonder whether we're defending Osgiliath. Boromir looked at him, or merely witnessing its death. The silence that followed felt heavy, because there was truth in the observation. The city had been dying for generations. The enemy merely hastened the process. Boromir eventually answered, "We hold what we can." Faramir nodded. "I know. And we hold it because someone must." The younger brother smiled faintly. A very Boromir answer. The elder brother grinned. "And what would your answer be?" Faramir considered, then looked toward the stars. "Perhaps cities are not stone." Boromir raised an eyebrow. "There speaks the scholar." Faramir laughed softly. "What I mean is this." He gestured toward the river. "The city isn't these ruins. The city is the people defending them." The elder brother thought about that, and eventually nodded. Perhaps Faramir was right. He often was, even when Boromir disliked admitting it. The conversation drifted elsewhere, to childhood, to old campaigns, to memories of Dol Amroth and the sea, to their mother. The subject arose rarely between them, not because they wished to forget her, because remembering hurt, even now. After all these years, the flute stopped. The camp grew quieter. Most of the men had settled down for the night. Only sentries remained awake. The moon climbed higher. The ruins glowed pale beneath its light. Then Faramir spoke again, more softly this time. "Have you been having the dream?" Boromir immediately became serious. For several moments he said nothing. Then, "Yes." The younger brother nodded. He had expected the answer. The dream had haunted both of them for months. Always the same, always mysterious. Fragments of words, fragments of places, a sense of urgency, a sense of destiny. Neither fully understood it, yet neither could ignore it. Faramir looked toward the stars. "I had it again last week." "So did I." The younger brother sighed. "Strange." Boromir nodded. "Very strange." The dream felt increasingly important, as though something far away was calling, waiting. The brothers sat quietly for a while, listening to the river, listening to the wind, listening to the sleeping city. Eventually Boromir stood. "We should rest." Faramir nodded. Tomorrow would be important. They still needed answers. The enemy preparations remained only partially understood, and every instinct told them time was running short. The brothers walked back toward the campfire. The men slept among the ruins, wrapped in cloaks, beneath ancient arches, under the watchful gaze of statues carved thousands of years before, the last defenders of a fading city. Boromir settled beside the fire. Sleep came slowly. Just before his eyes closed, he looked eastward one final time, across the dark ruins, across the enemy campfires, across the shadowed land beyond. And there, for the briefest moment, he thought he saw movement upon a distant tower, a figure, watching. Then it was gone. Perhaps a trick of moonlight. Perhaps not. The captain of Gondor remained awake for a few minutes longer, listening, thinking, watching, and far beyond the eastern ruins, hidden among darkness and stone, the enemy continued preparing. The assault was coming. The bridges would soon be tested, and before this story was over, the fate of Osgiliath would hang upon them. But for tonight, there was only moonlight, only memories, and two brothers sharing one final quiet evening among the ruins of kings. Chapter 4. The Watchtower of the Kings. The attack did not come the next morning, nor the morning after that, and somehow that was worse. The enemy remained hidden within the eastern ruins. Their campfires multiplied, their patrols increased, yet no assault materialized. The waiting became a battle of its own. By dawn, the Rangers were already moving through the city. Silent figures crossing shattered streets and ruined courtyards, watching, listening, reporting. Boromir and Faramir stood upon the roof of the old governor's palace as the sun rose over Mordor. The distant mountains appeared black against a crimson sky. Neither brother liked the sight. There! Mablung pointed toward the north. The ranger had arrived shortly before dawn with fresh reports. Boromir followed his gaze. Smoke. Far more smoke than the previous day. Entire columns now rose from the eastern districts. The enemy was building something substantial, something large. Faramir studied the horizon carefully. Not camps. No. Boromir agreed. Too organized. The younger brother frowned. Then what? No one answered. The only way to discover the truth was to move closer. An hour later, a small patrol departed. No banners, no armor that would catch the sunlight. Only rangers and a handful of trusted soldiers. The brothers led them personally. The route took them through some of the oldest parts of Osgiliath, districts abandoned long before either of them had been born. The city changed as they travelled. The western ruins still retained traces of Gondor. Watchposts, barricades, signs of life. Further east, everything became ancient, forgotten, a city consumed by memory. Trees grew through marble floors. Roots split stone roads. Entire buildings lay collapsed beneath ivy and moss. Birds nested inside shattered domes. The silence felt unnatural, as though the city itself was holding its breath. Eventually, they reached a district known simply as the King's Quarter, the oldest part of Osgiliath, the place where the ancient kings had once ruled. Even in ruin, it remained magnificent. Massive columns lined broad avenues. Broken statues watched from crumbling plazas. Fountains, dry for centuries, stood beneath tangled vines. Boromir paused. The sight always affected him. One could almost imagine the city alive again. Crowded streets, merchants, guards, nobles, children, life. Then the illusion vanished. Only ruins remained. Faramir stopped beside an enormous statue. The figure had lost its head long ago. The kings built well. Boromir nodded. Better than we do. The younger brother smiled. Another very Boromir answer. Their conversation ended abruptly. A whistle sounded. Mablung. The ranger crouched upon a nearby rooftop, signaling, enemy. Immediately, the patrol vanished into cover. Years of experience took over. No orders needed, no discussion required. The rangers became shadows. The soldiers disappeared behind fallen stone. Boromir and Faramir joined them. Moments later, the orcs appeared. Not many. 6, perhaps. Scouts. The creatures moved cautiously through the ruins, searching, watching, listening. One paused only 30 yards away. The smell reached the Gondorians before the creature did. Filth, rot, Mordor. The patrol remained perfectly still. The orc moved on, then another. Then the entire group vanished among the ruins. Only when they were safely gone did anyone breathe normally again. They're nervous. Faramir nodded. So would I be. Boromir frowned. What do you mean? The younger brother pointed ahead. They're guarding something. The realization settled immediately. The orcs had not been scouting. They had been protecting. The patrol continued. More cautiously now, more carefully. The enemy presence increased. Tracks, footprints, fresh camps, work sites, signs everywhere. Then they found it, the Watchtower. Or rather, what remained of it. Once it had been one of the tallest structures in Osgiliath, a great tower overlooking the river crossings. Though damaged, much of it still stood. More importantly, it offered a commanding view of the city. The climb took nearly 20 minutes. Broken staircases, collapsed chambers, unstable masonry. Eventually, the brothers emerged onto the upper platform and froze. Below them lay the answer. The eastern district swarmed with activity. Thousands of orcs moved among the ruins. Not hundreds. Thousands. Work crews hauled timber. Engineers constructed siege equipment. Supply wagons arrived continuously. Smoke rose from countless fires. The scale stunned even Boromir. The enemy had practically built an army camp inside the city itself. Faramir slowly lowered his telescope. Well, Boromir said nothing. The younger brother looked at him. That's worse than I expected. The elder brother nodded. Far worse. Then Mablung pointed toward the river, toward the bridges. The brothers raised their telescopes again and immediately understood. The enemy wasn't preparing siege towers, or battering rams, or catapults. They were preparing crossing equipment, floating platforms, pontoon sections, heavy ropes, timber supports, everything required to reinforce the ancient bridges, everything required to move an army across the Anduin. Boromir's jaw tightened. The objective had become clear. The enemy intended to seize Osgiliath completely. Not raid it, not damage it, occupy it. The city itself was the prize. A horn suddenly echoed across the ruins. The patrol turned instantly. Another answered, then another. Too close, far too close. They had been spotted. Mablung cursed quietly. Movement erupted below. Orcs poured into the streets. Dozens, then hundreds, searching, hunting. The Gondorians retreated immediately. The descent became a race. Down broken staircases, across ruined chambers, through ancient corridors. The enemy closed steadily. Arrows hissed overhead. One ranger stumbled. Another helped him. No one was left behind. The patrol escaped the tower moments before the orcs reached it. The chase continued through the city. The ancient streets echoed with shouts and horns. Twice Boromir's sword left its scabbard. Twice orc scouts died attempting to block their route. Yet the Gondorians maintained their lead. At last they reached safer territory. The enemy pursuit gradually faded. The western districts approached. The river glimmered through the ruins. Home, safety. For now. The patrol reached camp shortly before sunset. Exhausted, mud-covered, successful. The reports were delivered immediately. Maps covered tables. Numbers were estimated. Plans discussed. The conclusions proved unavoidable. The assault would come soon, very soon. That evening, Boromir stood upon the riverbank, watching the fading light. Faramir joined him. Neither spoke for some time. Across the Anduin, enemy fires burned among the ruins, thousands of them, like a second city appearing in the darkness. Finally, Boromir broke the silence. They'll attack within days. Faramir nodded. Yes. The bridges are the key. Again the younger brother nodded. Everything now revolved around the bridges. The ancient crossings built by kings long dead. If they held, Gondor might survive. If they fell, Osgiliath would be lost. The river flowed silently between the two armies. Ancient, indifferent, unchanging. Above them, the stars slowly appeared. And as darkness settled across the city of kings, the brothers realized something neither wished to admit. The battle for Osgiliath had already begun. The only question remaining was whether Gondor could hold long enough to save what remained, or whether the city was about to suffer its final wound. The assault began in rain. Not the gentle autumn rain that had drifted across Osgiliath days earlier. This was heavier, colder, driven by a wind blowing from the east, the sort of weather Mordor seemed to favor. The first warning came shortly after midnight. A horn echoed from the eastern ruins, then another, then dozens more. The sound rolled across the shattered city, deep, harsh, unmistakable. Boromir was already awake. So was Faramir. Neither brother had expected peaceful sleep. The reports from the Watchtower had removed any possibility of that. The attack they had anticipated had finally arrived. The city stirred instantly. Lanterns appeared. Orders were shouted. Men hurried toward defensive positions. The bridges. Everything depended upon the bridges. Boromir climbed the western watchtower overlooking the great bridge. Rain lashed his face. The Anduin below appeared black and endless. At first, he saw nothing. Only darkness. Then movement. Hundreds of torchlights, flowing through the eastern ruins like rivers of fire. The enemy was advancing, in strength. His heart sank. There seemed no end to them. Orcs poured from ruined streets and collapsed plazas. Companies, battalions, entire hosts. The eastern half of Osgiliath had become an army camp. Now that army was moving. Faramir joined him moments later. The younger brother carried a telescope. He studied the eastern approaches, then lowered it slowly. Thousands. Boromir nodded. I know. The Rangers had withdrawn from most of the eastern districts already. There was no point sacrificing men in territory they could not hold. Everything had been concentrated around the bridges. The ancient crossings would decide the battle. The enemy reached the eastern bridgeheads shortly before dawn. The first assault came quickly. Orc archers flooded the ruins. Arrows darkened the sky. The defenders responded immediately. The western battlements erupted with bow fire. For several minutes the river became a storm of missiles. Men died on both sides. Yet neither army advanced. Both waited, watching, testing. The true attack had not begun. Then the drum started, deep, rhythmic, relentless. Thousands of orc voices joined them. The sound echoed from every ruined building. A dreadful chorus, the sort of noise designed to weaken courage before battle even began. Boromir drew his sword. The familiar weight reassured him. Around him, the soldiers of Gondor tightened their grip upon shields and spears. Nobody fled. Nobody hesitated. The sons of Gondor had stood here for centuries. Today would be no different. The drums grew louder. Then came the charge. The first wave surged onto the great bridge. Hundreds of orcs. Perhaps more. Their torches reflected upon wet stone. War cries filled the darkness. The bridge seemed alive with movement. Hold. Boromir's voice carried above the storm. The archers waited. The enemy drew closer, closer, closer. Now. The response was devastating. Arrows poured into the packed ranks. The front lines collapsed immediately. Dozens fell. Others stumbled over the bodies. The bridge became chaos. Yet still they came. The second wave followed immediately. Then the third. The defenders fought relentlessly. Arrows, spears, stones, every weapon available. The bridge became a slaughterhouse. Rain mixed with blood. The river carried both away. Yet the orcs kept coming. Always more. Always another wave. Always another attack. The battle continued for hours. Dawn arrived unseen behind storm clouds. The city disappeared beneath smoke and rain. The defenders gradually fell back towards stronger positions. Not retreating, trading ground, buying time. Boromir moved constantly. One moment atop the bridge fortifications, the next fighting among his men. His presence inspired everyone around him. Wherever the fighting became fiercest, the captain of Gondor appeared, sword flashing, voice carrying above the storm. A living standard, a reminder that Gondor still stood. Faramir fought differently. The younger brother moved among the rangers, directing archers, organizing ambushes, launching sudden counterattacks from hidden positions within the ruins. Again and again, his men struck unexpectedly. Again and again they vanished before the enemy could respond. The brothers complemented one another perfectly, as they always had. By midday, the battle reached its climax. The enemy launched simultaneous attacks against every crossing. The Great Bridge, the South Bridge, even temporary pontoons. Thousands of warriors surged toward the western bank. The defenders bent, but did not break. Boromir stood atop the central span of the Great Bridge. Rain streamed from his armor. Around him, Gondorian soldiers fought desperately. The bridge had become the center of the battle, the center of the city, the center of everything. For one terrible hour it seemed the defenders might fail. The orcs reached the western approaches. The fighting became hand-to-hand, sword against axe, shield against shield. The old stones shook beneath the weight of battle. Then Faramir arrived. The rangers emerged from hidden positions among the riverside ruins. Fresh troops, fresh arrows, fresh hope. The counterattack struck like lightning. The enemy advance stalled, then faltered, then stopped entirely. The bridge remained Gondorian. Just, only just. By late afternoon, both sides were exhausted. The rain continued. The dead covered the approaches. The Anduin flowed red beneath the archers. Yet neither army possessed strength enough for another major assault. The fighting gradually faded, then stopped. The silence felt almost unbelievable. Boromir stood breathing heavily upon the bridge. His armor was scarred, his cloak torn, his sword stained. Nearby, Faramir emerged through the rain. The younger brother looked equally exhausted. For several moments neither spoke. Both simply stared across the river, across the ruined city, across the battlefield. The enemy remained there, thousands of them. The defenders remained here, hundreds of them. Neither side had achieved victory. Neither side had been defeated. The city remained divided, just as before. The rain finally began to ease. The brothers looked toward the ancient bridges stretching across the river. Those same bridges that kings had crossed, that armies had defended, that now carried the fate of Gondor itself. Boromir sheathed his sword. They'll come again. Faramir nodded. Yes. Neither doubted it. The battle was not over. But for one more day, the White City's frontier still held. And as evening settled over Osgiliath, The fires of both armies burned on opposite banks of the Anduin, watching, waiting, preparing for the final decision that was yet to come. Chapter 5. The Fall of the Bridges. The rain finally stopped on the third morning. For the first time in days, sunlight touched Osgiliath. It revealed a city wounded almost beyond recognition. Smoke drifted from ruined buildings. Broken weapons littered the streets. The dead lay where they had fallen. Along the great bridge, entire sections of stone were stained dark from battle. The Anduin flowed silently beneath them, carrying away blood, carrying away memories, carrying away the remnants of another terrible day. Boromir stood upon the western bridgehead and surveyed the damage. The reports had arrived before dawn. The numbers were grim. Hundreds of Gondorian soldiers had fallen. Entire companies no longer existed. Arrow stores were running low. Food remained plentiful. Men did not. The enemy, meanwhile, appeared undiminished. Every observation from the eastern ruins confirmed the same truth. More orcs arrived daily. More supplies, more engines, more troops. The battle for Osgiliath had become unwinnable. Not because Gondor lacked courage, not because Gondor lacked skill, because Mordor possessed time and numbers, both of which were endless. Footsteps approached. Faramir joined him upon the battlements. The younger brother carried several maps beneath one arm. Boromir did not need to ask. He already knew. It's worse. Faramir nodded. Much worse. The elder brother stared across the river. Enemy banners fluttered above eastern Osgiliath. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. The city they had defended all their lives was slowly disappearing beneath a sea of black standards. We can still hold. The words came automatically, instinctively. Boromir was a soldier. Holding ground was what soldiers did. Faramir remained silent for several moments. Then, for how long? The question lingered. Boromir knew the answer. A week, perhaps. 2, maybe less. The enemy would eventually overwhelm every position, every tower, every bridge. The city would become a tomb. Faramir unfolded one of the maps, the western bank, the defensive positions, the roads leading back toward Minas Tirith, the future. The city cannot be saved. The words hurt. They hurt both of them. Boromir looked away, toward the ancient skyline, toward the broken domes and shattered towers. He had fought here since youth. So had Faramir. Every stone carried memories. Every street carried ghosts. The thought of abandoning it felt unbearable. Yet the younger brother continued. The army can. Silence followed, because Faramir was right. The purpose of a soldier was not to die gloriously upon ruined walls. The purpose was to defend Gondor. And Gondor needed soldiers more than it needed ruins. The decision was made shortly before noon. The eastern districts would be abandoned, the bridges destroyed, the western bank fortified, the city divided. Orders spread quickly. Professional soldiers accepted reality better than most. There were no protests, no arguments, only preparations. The withdrawal began immediately. Supplies were moved west, the wounded evacuated. Engineers gathered tools and materials. Most importantly, demolition charges were placed beneath the ancient bridge foundations. Barrels of black powder, enough to shatter stone that had stood for centuries. The thought saddened many. Some of those bridges had existed since the days of the kings, long before either brother had been born, long before Denethor, long before Gondor itself had begun to fade. Yet history would not save them. History rarely does. The enemy attack arrived shortly after sunset, almost as though Mordor sensed what was happening. The horns sounded first, then the drums, then the advancing army. Thousands emerged from the eastern ruins, the largest assault yet. Boromir smiled grimly. They've realized. Faramir nodded. Then let's give them something to remember. The final battle began. The bridges became rivers of steel and fire. The defenders fought while withdrawing. A difficult task, a dangerous task. Yet the soldiers of Gondor performed it magnificently, tower by tower, street by street, position by position. The retreat unfolded with remarkable discipline. The enemy paid dearly for every yard. Boromir commanded the rearguard personally. Wherever the fighting became fiercest, there he appeared, sword in hand, voice carrying above the battle. The sight inspired exhausted men to hold a little longer, fight a little harder, endure a little more. Meanwhile, Faramir coordinated the withdrawal. Companies crossed the bridges in good order. The wounded first, then supplies, then archers, then infantry. Every movement calculated, every minute precious. The night seemed endless. The fighting never stopped. Yet slowly, steadily, the eastern bank emptied. By dawn, only a few hundred Gondorians remained. The rear guard, the final defenders, the last soldiers in eastern Osgiliath. The sun rose behind Mordor. A pale red light spread across the ruins. The city looked ancient once more. Not a battlefield, a relic, a memory. Boromir stood at the center of the great bridge. The enemy approached from the east. Faramir from the west. The moment had come. The younger brother dismounted. For several seconds neither spoke. They simply looked around. At the city, at the river, at the bridges, at everything they were about to lose. It was beautiful once. Faramir's voice was quiet. Boromir nodded. It still is. The younger brother smiled sadly. Perhaps it was, in its own way. The final companies crossed. The bridge gradually emptied. Only the brothers remained. The last two men upon the eastern side. For a moment neither moved. Both understood the significance. The city of kings. The ancient capital. The birthplace of countless memories. And now, the end. At last Boromir turned. Come. Together they crossed the bridge, step by step. The enemy surged forward behind them. The distance closed rapidly. The orcs realized what was happening. Their cries echoed through the ruins. The brothers reached the western bank. The engineers waited. The signal was given. For one final heartbeat, the ancient bridges stood unchanged. Then the world exploded. The sound rolled across the Anduin like thunder. Stone shattered. Arches collapsed. Masonry plunged into the river. Columns that had stood for thousands of years disappeared beneath clouds of spray and dust. The great bridge broke apart. Then the South Bridge. Then the smaller crossings. One after another. The river swallowed them all. When the dust finally settled, only broken remnants remained. The city had been divided, forever. The enemy reached the river moments later. Too late. The crossings were gone. The Anduin flowed between the two armies once more. Ancient, broad, impassable. A barrier restored. The battle was over. That evening, Boromir and Faramir stood atop a ruined western watchtower. The city stretched before them, or what remained of it. eastern Osgiliath burned. Thousands of enemy fires illuminated the darkness. The western bank remained Gondorian. For now, neither side had achieved complete victory. Neither side had suffered complete defeat. A stalemate, bought with blood, bought with sacrifice, bought with stone. The younger brother rested his arms upon the parapet. The city is lost. Boromir stared across the river, across the shattered bridges, across the ruins, then slowly shook his head. Not all of it. Faramir smiled faintly. No. The elder brother looked toward the west, toward Minas Tirith, toward the White City waiting beyond the horizon. And not today. The wind drifted across the river. The stars emerged overhead. For a while, the brothers stood in silence, watching the Anduin flow through the darkness, watching the broken city, watching the future approach. Neither knew exactly what lay ahead, but both sensed change, great change. The shadow was growing. The war was coming. And this fragile stalemate would not last forever. Yet for this one evening, Gondor still held the western bank. The white tree still flew above its towers, and two brothers stood together beneath the stars of Middle-earth, watching over a city that neither would ever see whole again. The end